Welcome to another Lore You Should Know. I am Greg Tito, and today I'm joined by Adam Lee.
Hello.
Hi, Adam.
Greetings. Hello.
On this segment where we delve into the lore behind Dungeons & Dragons, because it's fun to know, but also you can use it in your game, we are going to talk about two subclasses from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and what kinds of stories you can tell with these, bringing in the lore and information around them. And today we are going to talk about two, the Psi Warrior, which is a fighter subclass, and the Warlock Genie Patron. So Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Psi Warrior?
Psi Warrior. So yeah, these are fighters that have somehow tapped into psionic powers, and they use their minds, like telekinetic abilities and mind energy, to enhance their attacks and defend themselves, create shields. So they're tapped into that sort of that power suite. And I think, like, when I think about like a Psi Warrior, I feel like these fighters, at some point in their lives, they've either contacted, maybe they've been around a magic item that's resonated this energy, that's affected that's like kind of switch that put that switch on and unleash this power to them. They could have grown up under the tutelage of maybe a Githyanki. Maybe a Githyanki kind of took them under their wing for some reason or another, because Githyanki are weird and we don't know exactly what their what their motivations are here.
Yeah.
But yeah, they could have been raised by a Githyanki if it was a human. Or it could have been a human that was captured, or elf or whoever, that was captured by a mind flayer, and they were going to get their brains sucked out, and somehow they escaped, but their brains got scrambled, and then they grew up as this with this power, So there's some cool, like, kind of backgrounds about how this warrior came to be.
Are there ways, because you're talking about enemies essentially, I guess, with Githyanki and mind flayers, are there any kind of friendly contacts that could have resulted in this power suite for Psi Warriors?
Yeah, if you were, like, say if you were in Eberron or something and you were a Kalashtar, the Kalashtar are these the good aligned sort of Kori that are now dedicated to defeating the evil, the darkness that's coming in. So they would be great Psi Warriors, and they kind of have that sort of monk fighter kind of combo to them, where they have this innate psychic ability, and now they're going to use that for good. You could also have, like, maybe this character was sort of kind of taken away onto, like, sort of a Mount Celestia place, or was kind of held by a solar, and just being in that being's presence, it awakened this ability, this latent ability, and now that psychic link, or it could even be still psychically linked to whoever it is, if the DM wants to run it that way.
Ooh, and combine it with a group patron as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's all kinds of fun ways to do that. And in Tasha's Cauldron, like, you can, there's a section on session zeros, which is sort of like before the game even starts, and you're rolling up your character, you're kind of talking about, like, how did my character come to be, and what does my character do, and what is their motivation, and how did they get to being an adventurer? Like, they were born and they were just kind of derping around, and they're just like, oh, and then all of a sudden the call to adventure happened, and they were like, oh, now I'm going to do it. So you could say sort of like, yep, you're just, if it was like on Eberron, yep, you're a Kalashtar, and you just kind of heard whispers in your head. You were always kind of a different kind of kid. And then one day you got the transmission, and you kind of knew what your destiny was. If you're on Faerû, and it could be you grew up in an orphanage and you were kind of a different child, and then then all of a sudden this warrior comes, and says, now it's time for you to do your training, and you're like, oh my gosh. And then they train you in this way of how to channel your mind's abilities to focus your sword steel, or to create a psychic shield around yourself.
Yeah, it reminds me of that trope of you know coming to this late, right? Like being introduced to it, being like, wait, this is totally not possible what you're able to do, but then slowly learning it. I'm thinking of like Doctor Strange from the Marvel universe, about how like they had a completely different life and a completely different story, but then they're introduced to this thing that is otherworldly, and they now have a responsibility to learn how to use it to defeat evil.
Yeah. That's cool, because there's a section of Doctor Strange that is definitely a Psy warrior. Like, he is learning how to use this power to, be a martial artist and to, use swords or whatever to combat.
Yeah.
And then of course he's got all his wizardy stuff, but for the purposes of this one, it's about fighting and doing that. So it's, that's really cool, and then unlocking that, like you and your DM have that session 0 where you say like, okay, the DM's got this idea of like, yeah, really the ultimate destiny for that character is to find their way to this monastery way in the freaking mountains, and there you will kind of start to unlock more of these powers that you find in the subclass. Because as the subclass progresses, they get more and more cool, awesome psychic powers.
And the psychic powers do feel very superhero-esque, right? Like they're the type of things that you see in those type of movies, and then transporting them to a fantasy context just feels right, because you're able to do so many cool things. Yeah,
you got like telekinesis, and you got like, psionic, punch people out with your mind. Like it's really fun stuff. So, but yeah, it's like, and then in the context of Dungeons and Dragons, like the reason why I like bring up something like the Githyanki is like, their job is to clobber the mind flayers, and even though Githyanki are kind of jerky, there are the Githzerai as well that are less, sort of haughty and sort of prone to evil than the Githyanki. But they are both, aligned when it comes to mind flayers. It's like, hey, we want to, end their sort of influence on any world, and we want to kind of take them out. You could find a common ground, like if the campaign is going to be like taking place in the astral plane, or if it's like a Spelljammer kind of adventure, then you could have your psionic fighter being, got some, maybe a Githzerai monk took that fighter and trained them, and now you're going to have to go with your adventuring party who are complete fish out of water. They're like, whoa, and you're going to go on this thing, and you're going to deal with these psychic beings like the mind flayers, but this fighter will have a way to like combat that. And it's kind of fun to have that kind of a themed adventure.
Yeah, to use the kind of, psionic power for good, right? Like there's as I mentioned, there's a lot of enemies that use that power. And so being able to be like, but wait, I can use this in a way that furthers the party's goals, feels real fun to be able to take the tools of the bad guys and turn it against them.
Yeah. And to show like there's different ways like to use your powers, like, to like entertain somebody or something. Like it's like coming up with creative ways to just make them fun and
like
do
a
that kind of deal.
bard Psy warrior combo. Sounds super fun.
Yeah. That would be totally cool. Another way you could use a Psy warrior is like going into the Underdark, because everything's in the darkness there, and so there's a lot of creatures down there that use their mind to sort of feel their way around and stuff. And maybe your warrior is like kind of been trained by this monastery in the mountains to go and sort of deal with evil drow. Now we're kind of pushing the drow into like the drow kind of are a range of from good drow to evil drow, good drow like drifts to evil drow, like the ones that are in Mensa Baranza. So like if this warrior was trained that to, be a part of a group of fighters that then would sort of watch the portals of the Underdark, or go in there and just make sure that the drow weren't, going to do something, or if there was drow activity or Duragar activity, this warrior would be summoned to go in there and sort of suss out and put an end to what was going on. So
yeah, a Psy warrior would also be a great NPC to be able to be a guide in that Underdark or any kind of area where the party would be blind to what's happening. Like, for example, they got marooned on the astral plane and they don't know how to deal with it. Well, then here's a Psy warrior who is able to provide some guidance, maybe be a friend to the party, but maybe they're actually an evil. All right, so I got so many stories going through my brain already about using this subclass.
Yeah.
Awesome. So the other subclass we wanted to discuss was the Warlock Genie subclass. So I don't know a lot about the lore behind this. Tell me a little bit about what this Warlock can do.
Yeah, so the Warlock genies are these like sort of powerful elemental beings, and they come from all the different elemental planes, and they're also sort of in our myths, the genies like Aladdin and the lamp and all that. So it kind of sort of naturally progressed into the idea that warlocks who have patrons, powerful patrons that they derive their powers from, a genie would be a really good idea for one. And I love this one. And I also love the idea that this really ties into sort of telling Arabian Nights stories and tales like that. Like there's so much rich like lore and myth that of like Middle Eastern cultures, and to be able to tell those kinds of stories and tales. Go ahead and read 1001 Arabian Nights, and your brain will just burst with all these ideas for this kind of a character. So in Forgotten Realms, we have Zakara, which is kind of the sort of Arabian Nights themed area where you have, sands and temples and palaces made out of gold and things that sleep under the sands and undead warriors and, things that are demon possessed, So, and this warlock would then have this, what they call a noble genie, a good genie, a genie that's not like trying to trick you or trying to like take you over, which kind of traditionally genies were sort of not on the up and up. They were a little bit, they could kind of range from sort of tricksters to sort of outright demons that they were really like, oh man, you don't want to mess with those things. Like sort of the, it was one of those cautionary tales, like don't mess with these powers. They're too great for humans to deal with. So leave it all alone and just kind of be humble and be, take to your studies. But Zakara is a great setting. It's this high civilization, this very culture. They see kind of the rest of like on Faerun, like they see the rest of the world as kind of barbaric and uncultured and uncivilized. And from Zakara came the Badin, which are sort of these nomads that live in the Anoric Desert, which we chatted about quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And also the Kalashites that are now in like Kalimshan, which is kind of the south of the Sword Coast. So from this Zakara came all these different cultures that we kind of know about. But to revisit that, and you could take Zakara as it is, or you could sort of invent your own and invent your own Arabian Nights setting and use this background, or in any other kind of way you want to use it.
Yeah, and it could also be a way to introduce that area. Perhaps with the item. We think of the genie in the lamp is a pretty common way to introduce these, the idea of genies to a world, but maybe you find that in Waterdeep or Candlekeep or something like that, and the character creates a pact with the genie and must go to these other areas in order to learn more, gain more power. Perhaps it's just part of the agreement of the pact with this genie is to travel there and learn more about what's happening.
Yeah, that's fun. I mean, it's like depending on how the DM wants to play it, like, it could be that the very first adventure that this character goes on, like part of it is like, either getting to know the genie or freeing the genie, and because the genie gets freed, then it says, now we're pacted together, but now I'm going to help you out for the rest of your life. And so now the Warlock begins their training. And that's, again, another session 0 and anybody who's like unfamiliar with session 0, what that means, Tasha's kind of explains what that's all about. And I think it's a really fun and really cool way of putting more story into it and getting players to really think about their character in like sort of what happened leading up to their adventure. And it could be that this Warlock, all that stuff was done in a session 0, like freeing their genie, and their genie sets up, and then the moment when they're level 1, now they're pacted, now we're off and running, now we've got a whole new set of adventures for that character. Like the genie's like, I've got all these things I want you to do, because I'm going to give you power, but you're going to have to do it for me, because I am sort of now in this elemental plane where I'm just going to kick back and just sort of watch you operate, and you're going to do these awesome things for me.
Yeah.
Or it could be that the genie's like, I'm imprisoned, but now I can at least contact you, and I'm going to give you instructions on how to get me out of my prison. And that could be the main thrust of the adventure. Or it could be that the DM is running another campaign altogether, and that this character is like, oh, we're now in this dungeon, but there's a key down there that I need you to get, because it links to my problem.
Oh, nice. Here, so. A way to give bonus objectives to a Warlock. Mm-hmm. I also love the idea that you just said of being on the elemental plane, of fire or water, depending on which type of spirit is the pact. Perhaps they're trapped and they actually need the adventurer to, once they get to higher levels, go to the elemental planes and free them, or maybe it's some type of ruse all along, and they're actually trying to gain power in those elemental planes and getting the material from the material plane in order to make it happen. I don't know. There's so many possibilities there, and I like that this subclass brings in more of those elemental power types to the Warlock, which usually had just done necrotic and fire potentially, but now you can have cold and other damages in your wheelhouse.
You got all the elements: war, water, air, fire. And the thing I love about this subclass is that it kind of unlocks this door to a whole new sort of culture of myth.
Yeah.
That a lot of times in D&D we're really kind of in the sort of Celtic and Western European myths, and there's all over the world. Africa has these amazing myths, and Middle East has amazing myths, and Russia has amazing myths, and Japan and China, like India, like there's so many wonderful. It's all this human imagination about like how did the world come to be, and how did what is the world of fairies, and what are the world of like little people, and that little magical beings. Like every culture has their own sort of version of this, and hopefully kind of I think one of our intentions is that by creating something like this, it takes players and dungeon masters to sort of like read other material that's been written about different myths all over the world, and just kind of expand that sort of worldview to get this sort of more global sort of holistic view of like what human myth has all been about. And I think there's so many great ideas here, and hopefully this character class can unlock some of that and get some different stories being told.
I love it. It's a great way to introduce all types of different storytelling, and it's all there for you in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. We've gone over 2 subclasses here, but every page I flip through in this book just seems to jump to life in my brain, and I hope people are taking a look at it. And thank you to Adam for your work, as well as the rest of the D&D team on making it happen.
Yeah, everybody did a great job. Super proud of them.
How can people get in touch with you, Adam, about these subclasses or anything else?
Yeah, contact me at at Adam of Adventure on the Twitters. And I'm always happy to respond to any questions or just hear your tales of adventure and cool things that you made up and fun things that happened at the table. That is why I do the job that I do, is to hear how the human imagination has expanded and to hear how friends and tales were made for lifetimes. Yeah.
Friends and tales were made for lifetimes.
Friends and tales. Yeah. I was thinking just the other day, just like, man, there are things that I will not forget about, playing Dungeons and Dragons as a kid.
Yeah.
And there are people I can call up right now and say, do you remember that time when we were standing on the bridge and Dave slipped off the bridge and got eaten by the great white shark? And they'll be like, oh my God, yes, that was amazing. That was awful. And we all remember that. There's no way any of us at that table will forget it.
Remember a thing that didn't happen. You have these visceral memories of a battle or a climactic moment that is all in your collective imaginations, and I think that's super fascinating.
It is. It's like we were experiencing mass telepathy at that moment.
Right.
Like I know what character I was and at what point of view I was looking at that scene in my head. And all my friends will have that same thing. And my buddy Dave, he will have his experience of slipping off that bridge and falling in and his plate mail armor sinking him to the bottom and the great white shark going.
And he's going to tell his children and his children's children, and that tale will be passed down for generations.
Sung by the bard.
100 and 200 years from now, Bob the Bard will be like, do you remember when you were hanging on that bridge and a great white shark ate you?
Yes. How long will the echoes of that story go into the future?
The mighty Dave was the one.
Yeah, it'll change over time. It'll be like the mighty Dave and the Kraken, the Rainbow Bridge.
Oh, it's glorious. Well, thank you so much, Adam. As always, a pleasure to talk to. And we'll be back with some more fun lore soon.
Do.
Bye.
Thanks, Greg.